Hello and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. On August 14th, 2019, I released the episode of And the Runner-Up Is on the 1960 Best Picture race, where we discussed Elmer Gantry as the likely runner-up that lost Best Picture to The Apartment. But on second thought, what if the runner-up was really Sons and Lovers? Hello and welcome back to On Second Thought, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that we did not cover as the runner-up on the main show and discuss whether it may have actually been the runner-up. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, and we are revisiting 1960 today, closing out the 60s here. And on the main show, I said that Elmer Gantry was the runner-up to The Apartment, but today we're discussing if it actually could have been a different film, and that film is Sons and Lovers. And my guest today is probably one of my favorite people to have on the show. He's joined me on so many episodes that I've lost count, honestly. But most recently, you heard him on the very first Best Actress episode back in September. Excited to have him back almost a year later. Please welcome back to the show, Andrew Carden.
Kevin, how are you?
I'm excellent. Are you excited to talk about some sons and some lovers today?
I am. And I believe that this is actually my 10th episode with you, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh my goodness.
I could be wrong, but it's
I should probably
the 10th
know that as
anniversary.
the host. But
And I should note that in, I believe, all but 2 episodes, we have covered a Best Supporting Actress nominee.
oh wow, look at that.
I know,
You have a bit of a niche.
Yes. The only
Yeah.
ones that we've done that didn't have one were, I believe, Skippy and what's the other one? There was another one that didn't. It'll come to mind, but yeah, Skippy was one of them.
Again, you've done so many, but yeah, look at you, 10 Timers Club. I don't know if anyone else is in that club. Maybe Zach Laws is getting close. I don't know.
Yeah.
But well, thanks again. It's always a treat. And shall we jump right into it?
Let's do it.
All right. Sons and Lovers. It is a drama about a young man named Paul who is he's a talented artist living in a coal mining town in Britain. He lives with his somewhat overbearing mother, Gertrude, and his often drunk father who works in the mines. And he also has an older brother who is mostly off in London. And then there's a younger brother who dies in the mines, which basically leaves just Paul for his parents to really worry about in a sense. And Paul has a relationship with a local girl named Miriam, who has a very religious mother. So there's some awkwardness there relating to, Paul wanting to take things to the next level with her. But then he also meets a woman named Clara at the factory that he works at. And Clara is a strong-willed feminist activist who he just develops this connection with, even though she is married. So that's kind of complicated as well. So the film is essentially about Paul just trying to figure out essentially what he wants in life, and then also just having these strong familial ties, especially with his mother. So the film was directed by Jack Cardiff and written by T.E.B. Clarke and Gavin Lambert, adapting a novel. And it stars Dean Stockwell as Paul, Wendy Hiller as his mother, Trevor Howard as his father, Heather Sears as Miriam, and Mary Ure as Clara, among others. And Sons and Lovers was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning 1, but that one was not Best Picture. All right, Andrew, let's talk Sons and Lovers. What's your relationship with this film? What do you think of it now? Does it hold up 60 years later? What do you think?
So I think, in short, I think this is a pretty great film. In terms of my history with Sons and Lovers, I haven't watched this in probably about 15 years. I watched it when I was in high school.
Wow.
And I read the book in high school. There was this one class, it was British literature, and we had the choice of like 3 different novels. And I, alongside two other people, went with Sons and Lovers. Everybody else flocked to other, like, probably more popular books. But anyway, I really enjoyed the novel, which is a bit different from the film. And around that time, either via, I think it must have been either Turner Classic, or I may have even gotten it from the library. I watched the film as well, and I was really taken with the film. It's definitely much more condensed. It's basically a very condensed version of the novel, and it kind of chops off, I wouldn't say necessarily the entire first half, but perhaps the first quarter to a third of the novel. But nonetheless, I was very impressed with it. And revisiting it now, I don't think it's a perfect film by any stretch, but I think it does hold up reasonably well. I think it's very well acted. I think this is very strong ensemble work. And I think the film just looks spectacular. It really earned that Best Cinematography Oscar. The photography by Freddie Francis, who's, of course, a legendary cinematographer who did Room at the Top and The Elephant Man, and he won a second Oscar later on for Glory. I think the film just looks exquisite. I think that the story is, it's kind of that family drama that I can't resist. How much I love something like Ordinary
Oh, we
People.
love our family dramas, yes.
Yeah, and this is kind of a similar dynamic to Ordinary People. Seen through the eyes of the son, and the quarreling parents, and that whole family dynamic, and it really draws me in so naturally. So I think it's a very strong adaptation. I don't necessarily think it's as masterful as the novel. I think in several key ways the novel is superior, especially in the way that it shines more of a spotlight on the parents, whereas this is more so from the perspective of the son. Mm-hmm. But this held up really well for me, and I think it's kind of a shame that more people haven't seen it.
Yeah, so for me, this is only my second time seeing it. I can't say that this was one of those classic films that was really on my radar as much as others, like obviously The Apartment and things from this area. But yeah, second time seeing it. First time was for the Best Picture series, so it's always been in this context, really, that I've been watching this film and taking it in. And it's an interesting one because I like a lot of elements in the film, especially the performances, which I think are pretty uniformly excellent. There's also a very grounded approach to the material, which I think easily could have been romanticized and made into something maybe even more pretentious, or it could have gone in different directions, when I think it really feels pretty realistic, especially compared to other films from this time period. But I also think that there is a distance that prevents me from truly feeling immersed in this world like I should be. And it's possible that there's just a difference of approach here from British films versus Hollywood. But for however realistic it is and how relatable the problems are that, Paul is going through, I do just feel that there's a slight disconnect there for me, where I can appreciate all of those elements that I talked about and you talked about, but I'm not necessarily as engrossed by it as I want to be. I haven't read the novel, but I do definitely get the sense that there's some stuff missing in translation, especially relating to his family. Not as much with feels like there's a lot of lovers, but not as much sons, if that makes sense.
Right.
In the context of like you were saying, not as much to do with the parents as I want there to be.
It's a film that was produced by Jerry Wald, who was a huge producer at this time, and he had just come off of Peyton Place.
Peyton Place, yeah.
So I think he's trying to kind of make a Sons and Lovers that would appeal to the Peyton Place audience. And so he has Dean Stockwell, who kind of looks like he fits right into Peyton Place.
Definitely.
And just kind of matinee idol. Mm-hmm. And it's really different from the book in that you have this young guy, and it's all through his perspective, whereas, as I mentioned in the novel, the first quarter to a third of that is we get to see how the parents met and how their relationship kind of dissolved. And that's definitely missing from this.
Yeah. And I also think, weirdly enough, even if it is from Paul's perspective, I sort of just want more from what he's really passionate about with art, because I feel like so many of his scenes are just conversations with his lovers. And I feel like I was missing who Paul is sort of when he's by himself, when he's sort of lost in thought, or really just kind of like feeling passionate about whatever it is that he's creating. I just feel like, again, a bit of a disconnect with Paul himself. So that's not great. But having said that, I do think that Dean Stockwell is an interesting choice, considering we don't often get Americans playing British so much as the other way around. But what do you think of his take on this character?
Well, I could see somebody arguing that he's a tad miscast, not only because he's an American, but because he's just a little too polished looking, for this kind of gritty atmosphere. He kind of reminds me of a young Warren Beatty in this era. And again, I could see him just being like a boyfriend in Peyton Place, like easily. And for Stockwell, this is in between, his child actor and his middle-aged character actor phases. So, of course, he was in Anchors Away and Gentlemen's Agreements and countless other films as a child actor, and then later really, really blossomed as a character actor. And, Married to the Mob, he did Quantum Leap on TV, he did Blue Velvet. This is that period in between where I think he's doing some interesting work. I think he's actually even better in Long Day's Journey into Night. I think he's brilliant in that and deserved the nomination. In this, I think that he's convincing enough, but not quite as convincing as Hiller and Trevor Howard in terms of really owning this character. He's just maybe a little bit too charismatic, which isn't too much of a knock, against Stockwell, because he does have a very striking screen presence, very handsome and appealing, but, just a little too magnetic. I feel like there needed to be a little bit more grit there.
Well, I find that sort of, despite feeling like there are some limitations just in this character and how he's explored, there's a kind of cocky attitude almost that he brings to it, and a little bit of a swagger that actually provides something of I feel like a contradiction that is kind of compelling and makes him more three-dimensional, where I feel like Paul is supposed to be like this sensitive sort of mama's boy, right? And he's trying to figure out which path to take, which person he wants to be with, and there's a way that character is played where it could be, I don't know, maybe a little bit whiny or a little bit of a pity party, or just like his relationship with his mother could come across as a little creepy, or even you might feel like, how is this weird sensitive guy able to get these two different love interests, and like, you're not convinced by it. Whereas I think Dean Stockwell is able to kind of blend, to use another comparison, a Montgomery Clift type of energy. Not saying he's on his level, but it's similar in terms of like, he's a sensitive guy who just doesn't know how good looking he is.
Right.
Along with a kind of confidence in his convictions. Like when he's really going off on a tangent about how like a bird is able to demonstrate religion, which is one of those sort of deep thoughts that you have when you're in your late teens and early 20s and you're really like thinking about the world. He has also just that vulnerability to show you that he's sensitive, just in the way that he kind of stares off in that dreamy way. I think he's always kind of had a very empathetic style of performance, just in what he's able to do, like with his eyes, especially like in Blue Velvet, of course. But then also to be like, yeah, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I know I'm going to figure it out. I just have to sort of focus on myself for a while, which is how it sort of ends.
Right. And I think that his charisma is most effective in the scenes opposite Mary. I don't know if her last name is pronounced Ur or Yuri, but I think that they have a very strong, sexual tension. And, I mean, they're both just such beautiful people. And I think that his magnetism is especially put to good use in his scenes opposite her. So, yeah, but I think that Stockwell, even if I'm not 100% sold on the performance, I think he has a terrific rapport with both Hiller and Trevor Howard. I think that their back and forth is always interesting. And I think that he makes for a convincing enough um,
Yeah.
Paul, even if I think that Howard and Hillard just feel so lived in this.
Right.
They're so
I
great.
I honestly think the best performance in this film by a mile is Wendy Hiller.
Agreed. Agreed.
The great
Absolutely.
Wendy Hiller.
I can't believe she wasn't nominated and
I
really
don't
didn't seem to get
understand.
much traction. Yeah.
I don't understand. Was it category confusion? Because she's in quite a bit of the film, relatively speaking. Like it feels like she's in it more than Trevor Howard,
Oh
who
yeah.
is in
Yeah.
lead. Yeah.
I believe that she was campaigned in lead. I mean, I haven't seen any like for consideration ads. I don't know if there were for
Mm,
consideration ads, but my understanding is that she was campaigned in lead.
yeah.
And I know that it was a somewhat busy year, and I mean, even Gene Simmons didn't make the cut for Elmer Gantry, which is
Oh yeah.
also very confusing. But I think Wendy Hiller is just brilliant in this. I think she hits all of the right notes and strikes a really careful balance as this sort of you know manipulative but certainly very well-intentioned matriarch, this
Right.
person who has an incredibly profound, not always positive influence on the men in her life. I think that it's probably Wendy Hiller's best performance, even if it isn't a nominated one. I think that she's just terrific as this woman who, can be, over the moon delighted one moment and then is brought down by the sight of what she perceives as competition to her. So like the
Hmm.
scene where Paul takes her to the art exposition and Gertrude is just so delighted and surprised, and then she sees that Miriam is there and the attitude just completely changes.
Right.
So I think that she hits all the right notes, and it's a really complex character and a tricky one to nail. But I mean, for me, this is such an easy Best Actress nomination. I think she's
Definitely.
fantastic.
Hmm. Yeah, I think she's so in the pocket in this character. You feel like this is a woman who's really gone through some hardship, but she loves her sons more than anything. She loves her husband, even though he treats her like dirt sometimes,
Yeah.
and you definitely feel the weight of her having to deal with that. And as the film goes along, you definitely feel the weariness in her even more. And I have to say, I don't know if I caught this the first time I watched this, but there's a real quality about her that I also find in another modern day actress, not only for their slight resemblance and the voice, but just sort of their ability to make you empathize with their character. Olivia Colman,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
If there was ever to be another adaptation of Sons and Lovers, I feel like Olivia Colman is a pretty good choice for that role.
Yeah, I think that they did a TV movie in the 80s. I think it was in the 80s with Eileen Atkins in the role. And
Yeah,
it's of
that's
course so
perfect
easy
too.
to it's so easy to picture her in this role
Yeah.
too. It's
Hmm.
it's such a juicy role. It really is. It just seems like the kind of quintessential, Oscar role. So
Yeah.
it's crazy that that didn't happen, especially since she was such a kind of a mainstay at the Oscars for some time.
Well, she had just won for Separate Tables,
Right.
right? A few years prior. I don't know
Yeah.
if there was like Wendy Hiller fatigue. Like I don't know what the deal was.
Right, right. I guess that A Man for All Seasons hadn't happened yet,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, that was a few years. Yeah. But
But she's so great in this. And there's when Paul tells Gertrude that he's not going to go off to London and pursue his dreams,
mm,
and just the look on her face, like that joy that she just cannot hide.
yeah.
It's such a subtle, brilliant performance. I love it so much. And there's also the scene where I think his brother, I think the train station, and his brother is taking off, and he takes out a picture of the woman that he's fallen in love with, and she's just like, oh, can't believe he would like her more than his own mother, someone like that.
Yes, and
But
she
she has
comments on like the fact that she doesn't have a necklace on.
right, right. She has so many great zingers in this, just great
Yes.
line deliveries. And I think that the film, it just isn't on the same level anytime that she's not on the screen.
Agreed.
She's just such a force here. And much as I admire Dean Stockwell and Mary Yuri, I think the scenes without Howard and Hiller are a little bit on the inferior side.
I would agree.
Um,
But just to sort of go through the plot somewhat chronologically, I think, relatively speaking, it's such a character-driven film that it's kind of a film that's, for me, more about atmosphere and tone more so than plot. But we can talk about some of the other highlights. I think definitely from the beginning, we get a pretty strong sense of what this family unit is and their dynamic. And Paul is this artist who's just showering his mother with love. He's literally drawn a picture of her,
mm,
and he just becomes irate when his father kind of smudges it. You see that, right, like you said, she can be a little bit overbearing, very attentive to him, but that also his father is so belligerent and doesn't really seem to care or realize the extent of what he's doing or what kind of effect it has on his family. Trevor Howard, I think, is also really excellent in this role. Really wild to see him like this after knowing him and loving him from Brief Encounter. Just
oh yeah,
a world of difference there.
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean Trevor Howard. I mean, he doesn't even seem to be acting. He seems like a coal miner. He just
Absolutely.
looks and feels like a coal miner. And I mean, for the most part, he's this incredibly aggravated, exhausted man. But he also, I think, provides a lot of the film's comic relief. I mean, there isn't a ton of comic relief, but there's the Christmas party where he gets to sing. He walks out like basically almost naked, just wearing a towel, and everybody's around. Yeah, I think he's terrific. I'm not sure he's lead. I think that's
Probably not.
perhaps a stretch,
Yeah.
but he's wonderful in this.
But I mean, he is a name. So
That's true. That's true.
therefore, he's in lead. We're still
Especially
in
in this
that
era.
era. Right.
Oh yeah.
And then with Miriam, I'm curious to know your thoughts on Miriam a little more because I think more than really finding that relationship to be interesting, I think for me, what it comes to represent sort of speaks to one of the bigger themes in the film, which is just repression
Mhm.
and this desire to break out of what's been built for you and what people expect of you, especially your parents. Because, Miriam's mother is what I would call dangerously religious.
Mhm.
She's just completely puritanical and believes that we're put on earth to suffer and that relationships and marriage is just for procreation. And it's definitely forced Miriam to grow up in this household with certain views that she is probably shaped by, maybe unconsciously. And that's where she runs into problems with Paul because eventually, he more or less pressures her into having sex, even though she feels kind of skittish about it, but they do it, and then they both seem to regret it almost immediately afterward. Um, so they're
Yeah.
both having to confront certain aspects of their upbringing in a way.
Right, and I mean, he's just awful to her after they have sex. He's so nasty and mean to her.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, these are two young people who just desperately don't want to end up like their parents. She
Mm-hmm.
has this very religious, but clearly, in my opinion, especially the way she's portrayed in this, is very cold and
Yeah.
sexually repressed woman.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul, he knows that his parents once madly loved each other, which is, very much showcased in the book, but just kind of talked about a little bit here. And he knows that they were once madly in love and that, any passion they have is just bickering. It's not
Yeah.
love. And so he doesn't want to end up like them. So you have these two people who, very much like each other, but, are fearful of the consequences of, coming together. Are they going to end up like their parents? And, that is fascinating. I don't think that Heather Sears gives, the greatest performance in this. I think she's, perfectly fine. And I think that the character, as written, and perhaps to an extent in the book too, can be a little grating and overbearing. But, I think that the relationship is very interesting. Although I don't know if I necessarily think it's satisfying to have the film end on them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean that's kind of how the film is sent off is
Mm-hmm.
a final scene between the two of them, where I really wish it was something focused on the family, perhaps even ending on the scene between Paul and Walter.
Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.